वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीर्वुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकीनन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरोन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण। Last two parts of this particular anuccheda are remaining. Jiva Goswami discussed the 14 shlokas, the last 14 shlokas of the chapter 15 of the third canto. And then after discussing those 14 shlokas, then he is doing further discussion on this particular section. Whatever from other Purva Paksha arguments with the Advaitavadis, those arguments are addressed by Jiva Goswami. So we'll continue this. So here we go. Nanu bhavatu tesham anandadikyat tasmin nirvishesha swarupanandasyaiva ghanaprakashata upadi vaishishtyat. So in this argument, this is a Purva Paksha. Advaitavadis are saying that the four Kumaras, they experienced the same bliss of the Nirvishesha Brahman. Nirvishesha Swarupa Anandasyaiva Ganaprakashata Upadi Vaishishtyat. Yataha Vishuddha Sattva Sambhavitayam Chitta Vrittau Yad Brahma Spurati Tadeva Ghanibhuta Khanda Vishuddha Sattvamaye Bhagavati Spurat Tad Adhyasthataya Tadaikyamapannayam Tasyam Visheshata Eva Spurati. Atayev Shri Vigrahadi Parabrahmanor Abeda Vakyamapi Tad Atyanta Tadatmya Prekshayaiva. So here Jiva Goswami is saying that Nanu Bhavatu. Whenever the word Nanu comes, that means there is a counter argument. Nanu Bhavatu. Let us consider for a moment that the Kumaras experience Tesham Ananda Adikya. Kumaras experience of extreme bliss upon witnessing the Lord's form was simply a condensed manifestation. Gana Prakashata. Gana means condensed. When the Kumaras experienced extreme bliss by seeing the Lord's form, it is simply the condensed manifestation of the bliss of unqualified Brahman. They experienced the same bliss of the impersonal Brahman. The same bliss was they experienced in a condensed form. Gana Prakashata. Nirvishesha Swarupa. Its density being why they experience the condensed bliss, because yataha vishuddha sattva sambhavitayam chitta vrittau yad brahma spurati tadeva ganibhuta. Its density being due to the imposition on Brahman of certain distinguishing characteristics known as upadhis. So according to Advaitavada doctrine, Bhagavan is nothing but when the impersonal Brahman, when certain upadhis are superimposed or imposed on Brahman, then we get Bhagavan. When certain upadhis are imposed on the impersonal Brahman, then the Bhagavan's form appears. So therefore here the argument is that when the Kumaras experience the bliss in relation to Bhagavan, they experienced the same Brahmananda, but in a condensed form. So according to this view, Bhagavan is Brahman qualified with upadhis. In other words, the Brahman that appears in the mind states, Chitta Vrittau Yad Brahma Spurati, that arise out of just a portion of pure being, also manifests in Bhagavan, who is condensed and undivided pure being. So they say that the same impersonal Brahman, when it is imposed by the upadhis, then it becomes Bhagavan. So therefore, they experience the same impersonal Brahman realization in a condensed form. They experience the same Brahmananda in the condensed form. And then they say, and then it's further said, then through the superimposition of Brahman as Bhagavan, the mind states are modified into exact conformity with Bhagavan. And so the Brahman that appears in the mind states does so in a qualified form. So hence the statement that there is no difference between the Lord's form and the Parabrahman is made only from the perspective that such a form acquires complete oneness with Brahman. So the summary, what is the argument here is that, what is the argument given by Advaitavadis is that the four Kumaras experienced the same Brahmananda of realizing the Nirvishesha Brahman in a condensed form when they got darshan of the Bhagavan Vishnu. It's not that they experienced some superior happiness. They experienced the same Brahman in the condensed form. Why in the condensed form? Because the Bhagavan is nothing but the Brahman which is superimposed by certain upadhis. That is what Bhagavan is. So therefore, when they encounter the Bhagavan, they experience the same Brahmananda in the condensed form. And then further the argument continues by the Advaitvadis. Atayev tatropadaaveka eva nirbeda paramananda samupalabhyate natu visheshakara gandopi. Therefore, tatropadaaveka. Therefore, in the various limiting adjuncts means upadhi. Only one undifferentiated supreme bliss is realized without even a trace of any kind of form. Nirbeda paramananda samupalabhyate natu vishesha kara gandopi. They experience the same Brahmananda only. Without a trace of any kind of form. They experience the same Brahmananda. And these adjuncts are required, these upadhis are required. Tatat upader apekshanam tu. These upadhis are required only for the sake of providing interesting experiences in each arising moment in the bliss of trance. Tattad upader apekshanam tu pratipada tad ananda samadhigata kautuka nibandanam. So these upadhis are required in order to give some interesting experiences in Brahmananda. So therefore, by this evidence, how can you try to tasmat katam anena pramanena tattat upadhinamapi paratatva akaratvam sadhyata iti. Therefore, how can you try to establish even these upadhis as forms of the absolute truth? By what evidence? By this evidence, how can you try to establish even these upadhis as forms of the absolute truth? So this is the argument of the Advaitavadis. From here to here. Now Jiva Goswami gives an answer. So I will again summarize the argument. The summary of the argument is that the Kumaras experienced the same Brahmananda, but in a condensed form. In a condensed form, they say that Bhagavan is nothing but Brahman superimposed with upadhis. So therefore, they experience the same Brahmananda. Because it is the Brahman superimposed upadhis, therefore they experience in a condensed form. And these upadhis are required in order to give, in order to provide interesting experience in each arising moment in the bliss of trance. So now Jiva Goswami is giving an answer. Uchyate Bhavan Mate Tavad Yat Shuddha Chitta Vrittau Parabrahma Spurati Tat Samyageva Spurati Vedam Shlesha Parityagenaiva Brahma Vidyatva Angikarat. Bhavan Mate, that means according to your doctrine. The Supreme Brahman that manifests in the Chitta Vritti, in the pure mind states, is a complete manifestation. Since it is agreed that Brahma Vidya is established only by abandoning all trace of differentiation. Because incomplete jnana is not accepted as the absolute truth. And because it is impossible to attain oneness by such incomplete knowledge. So according to the Jiva Goswami is telling that according to your doctrine, that the Supreme Brahman manifests in the Chitta Vritti, that means the Nirvishesha Brahman, which manifests in the Chitta Vritti, that is the complete manifestation. According to the Advaitavada doctrine, realization of the impersonal Brahman is the highest realization. So according to the Advaitavada doctrine, the Brahma Vidya is established only when a person goes beyond all differentiation. Only when a person abandons all trace of differentiation. Vedam Shlesha Parityagenaiva Brahma Vidyatva Angikarat. Asamyak Jnanasya Tattvanangikarat Tena Kaivalya Asambhavat Cha. Because asamyak jnana, incomplete jnana, is not accepted as the absolute truth. Asamyak jnana sa tattva anangikarat. Incomplete jnana is not accepted as the absolute truth. And because it is impossible to attain oneness by such incomplete knowledge. Tena kaivalya asambhavacha. So according to the Advaitavada doctrine, when a person has a differentiation, that means he is having an incomplete jnana. And by that incomplete jnana, a person cannot attain the kaivalya mukti. He cannot attain oneness by such incomplete knowledge. Atona Shri Vigrahadav Adhikavir Bhava Angikaro Yujyate. Therefore, it is improper to accept that Brahman has an extra manifestation in the Lord's form. So therefore, Jiva Goswamis, using their own doctrine. Therefore, according to your own doctrine itself, it is improper to accept that Brahman has an extra manifestation in the Lord's form. Because according to your doctrine, that when a person has asamyak jnana, that means when a person is actually differentiating, when a person has a feeling of differentiation, that means he is having an incomplete jnana. And in that incomplete jnana, he cannot actually get realization of the Brahman. So, but the Advaitvadis said that when the Kumaras experienced Bhagavan Vishnu's form, they experienced the same Brahmananda. But a person can experience Brahmananda according to Advaitvada doctrine when a person goes beyond the differentiation. But if they are experiencing the Bhagavan's form, that means they have not gone beyond the differentiation. Then that means they cannot experience the same Brahmananda. Sato na Shri Vigrahada adhika avirbhava angikaro yujyate. And then further he says, Kimcha Shuddha Sattvamaya Vigrahadi Lakshanopadaya iti Vadatas Tava Ko Abhiprayaha. Then he is asking a question. Moreover, what is your intention? What is your intention in claiming that the upadis that characterize the Lord's forms, attributes and so on are pure sattva in nature? So, Kim cha शुद्ध सत्वमया विग्रहादि लक्षणोपादयति वदतस्तव को अभिप्राय. Jiva Goswami is raising a question. What is your intention in claiming that the upadhis that characterize the Lord's form are pure sattva in nature, Shuddha sattva? Further he is asking, Kim tat parinamaste tat prachurava? Do you mean that they are transformations of pure sattva alone? Or that they are replete with sattva? Tat parinamaste tat prachurava? Or they are transformations of pure sattva alone, or that they are replete with sattva? That means replete with sattva means predominance of sattva. Tat prachurava. And then Jiva Goswami is answering. Nadyaha. Na adyaha. The first option cannot be possible. Why? Rajo asadbhavena parinama sambhava iti yuktam. The first option is not possible because, as was made clear earlier, there can be no transformation without Rajoguna. Transformation can occur only when there is Rajoguna. But if the upadhis are made of Shuddha Sattva, then Brahman cannot be transformed into Bhagavan. Therefore, the first option is ruled out. Nacha Antyaha. The second option is also not possible. Why? Yeshu Vigrahadishu Tat Prachuryam Te Mishra Sattvasya Karyabhuta Ityarthapattau Sattvam Vishuddham Shayate Bhavan Stitau 10.2.34 Ityadi Vachana Jate Vishuddha Pada Vayartyamiti Choktameva. So here the second option is also not possible, because by accepting that these forms are replete with sattva, that means they have a predominance of sattva guna, it implies that they are manifestations of mixed sattva. That means some rajoguna, tamoguna is also present, but there's a predominance of sattva guna. Te mishra sattvasya karyabhuta ityarthapattav. So they are manifestations of the mixed sattva. And so the word pure would become meaningless in statements like Sattvam Vishuddham Shayate Bhavan Sitam. In 10.2.34, the prayers of the Devatas to Lord Krishna, prayers of the Devatas in Lord Krishna, it is mentioned that you accept Vishuddha Sattva for maintenance. Sattvam Vishuddham Shayate Bhavan Sitav. You accept Vishuddha Sattva for maintenance. So for these statements would, if you accept that the upadhis are made of pure sattva, Shuddha Sattva, then the Brahman cannot be transformed into Bhagavan, because for any transformation to occur, the upadhis have to be in Rajoguna. There has to be Rajoguna. The second option, the upadhis are having predominance of Sattva Guna. This option is also not possible, because this will contradict the other statements in the Bhagavatam, which says that Bhagavan accepts Shuddha Sattva for maintenance of this world. So then he says, Astu va vimishratvam tatapi. So I think now you can read this translation. Objection, let us consider for a moment. Somebody can read this.
Anyone wants to read?
Yeah, objection. Let us consider for a moment that the Kumara's experience of extreme bliss upon witnessing the Lord's form was simply a condensed manifestation of the bliss of unqualified being, Nirvishesha Swarupa Ananda. its density being due to the imposition on Brahman of certain distinguishing characteristics known as upadhis. According to this view, Bhagwan is Brahman qualified with upadhis. In other words, the Brahman that appears in the mind states chitta vritti that arise out of just a portion of pure being, Vishuddha Sattva, also manifests in Bhagwan, who is condensed and undivided pure being, Vishuddha Sattva. Then through superimposition of Brahman as Bhagwan, Adhyasa, the mind states are modified into exact conformity with Bhagwan. And so the Brahman that appears in the mind states does so in qualified form. Hence, the statement that there is no difference between the Lord's form and Parabrahman is made only from the perspective that such a form acquires complete oneness with Brahman in the Chitta Vritti. Which is this, therefore, also.
Yeah, you can read. Okay.
Therefore, in the various limiting adjuncts, upadhis, only one non-differentiated supreme bliss is realized, without even a trace of any kind of form. These adjuncts are required only for the sake of providing interesting experiences in each arising moment in the bliss of trance. So, by the evidence, how can you try to establish even these upadhis as forms of the absolute truth? So the answer given is, according to your doctrine, the supreme Brahman that manifests in the pure mind states is a complete manifestation. Since it is agreed that Brahma Vidya is established only by abandoning all traces of differentiation, because incomplete jnana is not accepted as the absolute truth, and because it is impossible to attain oneness by such incomplete knowledge. Therefore, it is improper to accept that Brahman has an extra manifestation in the Lord's form. Moreover, what is your intention in claiming that the upadhis that characterize the Lord's form, attributes, and so on are pure sattva in nature? Do you mean that they are transformations of pure sattva alone, or that they are replete with sattva, that is, having a predominance of sattva? The first option is not possible because, as we made clear earlier, there can be no transformation without Rajoguna, nor is the second option possible, since by accepting that these forms are replete with sattva, it implies that they are manifestations of mixed sattva, and so the word pure, Vishuddha, would become meaningless in statements cited earlier, such as you accept Vishuddha sattva for maintenance.
Till this we discussed. Further, this is maybe a little difficult to maybe understand, but when you go through, like you heard once, when you go through again, second time, third time, then it will become clear what is the exact objection by the Advaitavadis and what is the answer given by the Jiva Goswami.
Prabhuji,
Ah.
this Vishuddha sattva and Swarupa Shakti here can be one and the same, or this?
Yeah, Vishuddha Sattva is a aspect of Krishna's Swarupa Shakti.
Okay.
So the Advaitavadis, they don't want to accept that the Kumaras experienced a higher bliss than the Brahmananda. That they don't want to accept that. Because Bhagavatam, when you take the literal verses of the Bhagavatam, Kumaras experienced a higher bliss than Brahmananda. Sankshobham Tasyaravinda Nayanasya Padaravinda Kinjalka Mishra Tulasi Makaranda Vayu Antargatasva Vivarena Chakara Tesham Sankshobham Akshara Jusham Apichitta Tanvo. Although they are situated in the Akshara Jusha, the Brahmananda, they experienced a higher bliss. Their mind and body became agitated on hearing, on smelling the fragrance from the lotus feet of the Lord. But they don't want to accept that they experienced a higher bliss. They experience the same Brahmananda. Because Bhagavan is nothing but Brahman superimposed with certain upadhis. They experience the same Brahmananda. So they are bringing the concept of the upadhis. These upadhis are, Bhagavan is nothing but the Brahman superimposed with the upadhis. So Jiva Goswami is addressing those points actually. If you are saying Bhagavan is a Brahman superimposed with the upadhis, is the upadhi made of Shuddha Sattva or upadhi made of the predominance of Sattva Guna? If it is Shuddha Sattva, then what are the problem? If the upadhi is made, if you are saying the upadhi is made of Shuddha Sattva, then transformation cannot happen without Rajoguna. So therefore, your claim that the upadhi is made of Shuddha Sattva is not valid. If the upadhi is made of predominantly of Sattva Guna, then this will also encounter into problem, because many scriptural statements which say that Bhagavan maintains this world by Shuddha Sattva. So like that the problems come. So like that he is giving different. Further, astu va vimishratvam vimishratvam tatapi tadrishe brahma spurana yogyataiva na sambhavet kim punar visheshena yet uddeshya vismritischa syat. Or if it is granted that these upadhis are a mixture of the gunas, vimishritvam, astu va vimishritvam, then they would not have the ability to bestow any kind of experience of Brahman. What to speak of Brahman qualified by form? So those who put forth such ideas have forgotten the purpose of their own argument. If you are saying that another fault, if the upadhis are made of the mixture of the gunas, then by realizing that Bhagavan, one cannot experience Brahmananda. One cannot get the experience of the impersonal, one cannot get the experience Brahmananda. So therefore, the Advaitavadi's original purpose was that the Kumaras experienced the same Brahmananda by experiencing the Lord's form. And then they say that this Lord's form is nothing but the Brahman superimposed with the Upadhis. Now Jiva Goswami is saying that, okay, what are the Upadhis made of? Are the Upadhis made of Vishuddha Sattva or the predominance of Sattva Guna? If it is Vishuddha Sattva, there will be problem. If you are saying the Upadhis are made of predominance of Sattva Guna, then there are two problems. One is contradiction of the other scriptural statements. Second is that then they cannot experience the Brahmananda. They cannot experience the Brahmananda. Then further, Ata Akhanda Vishuddha Sattvashrayattvena Tepi Tad Rupa Tayai Tayayeva Uchyate. Tad Rupa Tayai Vochyante. Tayai Vochyante. If you split in Sandhi, it will be Tad Rupa Taya Yeva Uchyante. Now these Upadhis, being supported by undifferentiated Vishuddha Sattva, are also said to be of the same nature. Tat Rupataya Eva Uchyante. Tatascha Te Swa Anubhuta Akhanda Shuddha Sattve Tasmin Brahma Anubhavanti iti chet. So if it is claimed that the Kumaras experienced the Brahmananda through the Lord's form of undifferentiated Vishuddha Sattva, a state of being they had already previously realized, this also is inappropriate. tad ayuktam. Tad ayuktam. Why? Kalpana gauravat. Kalpana gauravat. It is inappropriate because it is destroyed by the defect of cumbrous assumption or cumbersome assumption. Kalpana gaurava. What is that Kalpana gaurava? That is explained. Te achakshataksha vishayam swasamadhi bhagyam. This is from 3.15.38. Part of the shloka is quoted. Te achakshataksha vishayam swasamadhi bhagyam iti sakshadeva gochari kritattvena uktataya parampara drishtatva pratigatacha. Because Kumaras directly saw the Lord, and it was stated that the fulfillment of their trance became apparent to their eyes. The fulfillment of their trance, samadhi, became apparent to their eyes. So therefore, this contradicts the idea that they saw him through a succession of causes or upadhis. So here Jiva Goswami is saying that if it is claimed that the Kumaras experienced the same Brahmananda through the Lord's form of undifferentiated Vishuddha Sattva, a state of being they had already previously realized, this is inappropriate because there is a Kalpana Gaurava. There is a Kalpana Gaurava, cumbersome assumption, because there is a needless multiplication of causes. So moreover, the Kumaras directly saw the Lord, as was stated. The fulfillment of the trance became apparent to their eyes. This contradicts the idea that they saw him through a succession of causes or upadhis. So we'll once go through it, and then when we read the purport, it will become more clear. Tasmat tasya shuddha sattvasya prakritatvam tu nishiddhameva. In this way, it is completely refuted that there can be any material influence in the state of Shuddha Sattva. Tasman nate prakrita sattva parinamaha. So the Lord's form are neither a transformation of the material sattva. The Lord's form are neither a transformation of the material sattva. Nava tat prachuraha. Kintu saprakashata lakshana shuddha sattva prakashita iti praktanameva uktam vyaktam. Praktanamevoktam vyaktam. So the Lord's form are neither a transformation of the material sattva, nor are they replete with it. Rather, they are manifestations of the Shuddha Sattva, in which the self-luminosity is an inherent characteristic. This was stated earlier and has been further clarified here. Atayeva tesham upaditva nirakrites tattad anubhavananda vaichitri cha sampadyate. So when the suggestion that the Lord's forms are a product of upadhis is negated, it naturally follows that the Kumaras experienced wonderful bliss by witnessing the Lord's form. So they experienced a wonderful variety of spiritual bliss when they witnessed the Lord's form. Further, tataiva tameva evam bhutam achakshata iti tattad vishaya saundarya varnanam prastutopakaritvat sartakam syat. Similarly, when the Lord's form and qualities are understood in this way, the Kumaras' direct vision of Bhagavan and his beauty, as described in this section, becomes meaningful. Sartakam syat. because it confirms the overall topic under discussion. Prastuta upakaritva tattat vishaya saundarya varnanam. Because it confirms the overall topic under discussion, the intention of which can be satisfied only if the Bhagavan's form is constituted of undifferentiated pure sattva. Akanda shuddha sattva maya matrena eva abhipreta siddhehe. अतएव निरीक्ष्य च न वितृप्तदृशः इति दृक्सम्बन्धित्वात् रूपकृतै वा तृप्तिरुक्ता. So therefore the statement that their eyes were not satiated by seeing his form, since it was made in relation to the Kumara's sense of sight, shows that their unsatiatedness was caused by the Lord's form. So now you can read from here, or if it is granted.
Or if it is granted that these upadhis are the mixture of gunas, then they would not have the ability to bestow any kind of experience of Brahman. What to speak of Brahman qualified by form? Those who put forth such ideas have forgotten the purpose of their own argument. Now, these upadhis, being supported by undifferentiated Vishuddha Sattva, are also said to be of the same nature. So, if it is claimed that the Kumaras experience Brahman through the Lord's form of undifferentiated Vishuddha Sattva, a state of being they had already previously realized, this also is inappropriate because it is marred by the defect of cumbrous assumption, kalpana gaurava, or in other words, the needless multiplication of causes. Moreover, the Kumaras directly saw. After that, the Lord, as was stated, the fulfillment of their trance became apparent to their eyes. 3.15.38. This contradicts the idea that they saw him through a succession of causes or upadhis. In this way, it is completely refuted that there can be any material influence in the state of Shuddha Sattva. So, the Lord's forms are neither a transformation of material sattva, nor are they replete with it. Rather, they are manifestations of Shuddha Sattva, in which self-luminosity is an inherent characteristic. This was stated earlier and has been further clarified here. When the suggestion that the Lord's form are a product of upadhis is negated, it naturally follows that the Kumaras experienced wonderful bliss by witnessing the Lord's form. Similarly, when the Lord's form and qualities,
that we'll go through now. So then, you can read this also. Similarly, when the Lord's form, you can read that.
Similarly, when the Lord's form and qualities are understood in this way, the Kumara's direct vision of Bhagavan and his beauty, as described in this section, becomes meaningful. Because it confirms the overall topic under discussion, the intention of which can be satisfied only if Bhagavan's form is constituted of undifferentiated pure sattva. So the statement, their eyes were not satiated by seeing his form, Srimad Bhagavatam 3:15-42, since it was made in relation to the Kumara's sense of sight, shows that their unsatedness was caused objectively by the Lord's form.
We will go through the next section. Tataivacha शब्देन एव अक्षरजयित्वं शब्देनैवाक्षरजयित्वं पदारविन्द परिमलात्मक वायुलक्षणस्य तद्विशेषस्य दर्शितम्. Similarly, by the specific words aksharajusham api, shabdena eva aksharajayitvam, aksarajusham api, although situated in the bliss of the imperishable, used here, it is shown that the Lord's specific qualities, namely the aroma from his lotus feet, padaravinda parimalatmaka vayu lakshanasya, were able to surpass the imperishable Brahman. It was very clearly said, the air which has touched the tulsi leaf from the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, that produced a bliss which surpassed the Brahmananda. The words were clearly saying that Akshara Jusham Api, even though they were situated in Brahman realization. Anyata ubayatrapi Brahmanandasyaiva निर्विशेष तयोप लभ्यमानत्वे तया उपलभ्यमानत्वे विद्याजुषाम अपि इत्युपाधि प्रदानमेव उच्येत उपाधि युगलस्यैव मितस्पर्धित्व प्राप्तेः. So, otherwise, if in both instances means the experience of the impersonal Brahman and the Bhagavan, they had experienced only the bliss of Brahman without attributes. If somebody says that previously Brahman, Kumaras experienced the Brahmananda. Now when they experienced the Bhagavan, in both instances, they experience the same Brahmananda only. They experience the same Ananda of experiencing Brahman without qualities. Then both experiences would have been identical. Then it would be impossible for one to surpass the other. Then you cannot say that, the Bhagavatam cannot say that the Kumaras, when they experienced the Bhagavan, that experience surpassed the experience of Brahmananda. But the Bhagavatam is clearly saying that the experience of the Bhagavan's form, it was superior to the Brahmananda. Because the Advaitavadi's claim is that they experienced the same Brahmananda. But it is contradicting the Bhagavatam shloka. So, Upadhi Yugalasyaiva mitas spardhitatva prapte. In that case, instead of Akshara Jusham api, Akshara Jusham api, it would have been necessary to say, although situated in knowledge, Vidya Jusham api, so that Upadhis would then become the focus of the comparison. In that case, instead of comparing two degrees of completion of the absolute truth, that is Brahman and Bhagavan, the comparison would be reduced to no more than the mutual contention between the Upadhi of knowledge and the Upadhi of form. So Jiva Goswami is basically saying that the Bhagavatam verse is clearly saying that Akshara Jusham Api, although situated in Brahmananda, they became agitated in their mind and senses when they saw the form of the Supreme Lord, when they smelt the fragrance of the tulsi leaves. So therefore, you cannot say that they experienced the same Brahmananda. Then the words in the Bhagavatam would have been used in a different way. And then further he says, Anena Aksharanubhava Sukha Jayitva Katanena Vashishtadinam putrashokadikamiva tad avesha basa evayam ityapi nirastam. Atayeva. Here he is giving another instance. In the Mahabharata, there is an instance. Vasishta's 10 sons were killed by Kalmashapada. So, Vasishta, Vasishta's 10 sons, he had 100 sons. His 100 sons were eaten by King Kalmashapada, who had been possessed by a demoniac Kinkara by the arrangement of Vishwamitra. So you know that there was a competition between Vishwamitra and Vasishta. So Vishwamitra arranged King Kalmashapada to be possessed by a particular demoniac person. And then the Kalmashapada killed the 100 sons of Vasishta. So at that time, there's a description that Vasishta was overcome by grief and he tried to commit suicide many times, but he failed. And the story comes in the Mahabharata, I think Adi Parva. So the Advaitavadis say that Vasishta was a Brahman realized sage. So therefore, his grief, his lamentation was not real lamentation. So similarly, the Kumaras were also Brahman realized. So the Kumaras' attraction to the Lord's form could not be real because Brahman realized beings are beyond attachment, lamentation, and delusion. Just like Vasishta's lamentation upon the death of his 100 sons was not a real lamentation, similarly, Kumara's attraction to Bhagavan's form is not a real attraction. Because for Brahman realized beings cannot be overcome by these emotions like lamentation, attachment, etc. So that is being explained here. By stating that the bliss of beholding the Lord's form defeats that of Brahman realization, it is ruled out that the Kumara's absorption in the Lord's form was a mere semblance, like the great sage Vasishta's behavior of mourning for his sons. So Sridhar Swami commented, this verse demonstrates that the bliss of unalloyed service in relation to devotional love is superior to the bliss of mere abidance in one's original state of unqualified being. So the Advaitavadi's argument that the Vasishta's lamentation was not real. Similarly, Kumara's attraction to Bhagavan is not real. This argument is ruled out because it is clearly mentioned in the Bhagavatam. It is clearly mentioned in the Bhagavatam that when the Kumaras beheld the Lord's form, the experience they had, it was superior to the Brahman realization. Akshara Jusham api. So therefore, this argument of Advaitavadis is ruled out. And that is also confirmed by Sridhar Swami. Swarupanandadapi tesham bhajanananda adikyamaha. Swarupanandadapi, that means greater than the Brahmananda, the Bhajananandadi, the bliss by experiencing the Bhagavan's form in devotional service, that was superior. So Tasmad, we are just coming to end another maybe 5-10 minutes. Tasmadasti Vaichitriamapi. Tasmadasti Vaichitriamapi. Therefore, variegatedness exists in the Supreme Lord. Atayeva Tairapi Vichitratayaiva Prarthitam. Cheto livat yadinute padayo rameta ityadav. So that is why Kumaras took account of this variety in their prayers. That is why they prayed that if our minds can take pleasure like the bees in your lotus feet. That shows there is variety in the spiritual platform. And then he is giving a nyaya. अक्के मधुविन्देत किमर्थं पर्वतं व्रजेत् इति न्यायेन तद् उपाद्यन्तर अन्वेषण वैयर्त्यात् तेषां मत दन्वेषणक कौतुका अभावाच्च. So when there is a honey available in the kitchen, why should a person go to the mountain to get the honey? So similarly, therefore that the Advaitavadis claim when the direct meaning of the Bhagavatam verses is very clear, but Advaitavadis are trying to give a very indirect, complicated explanation. And the direct meaning is clear. Why are you putting so much of effort to give a complicated explanation? When the honey is available in the kitchen, why are you climbing the mountain to get the honey? That is the idea. So nor did the Kumaras have any interest in seeking out anything material. In seeking out anything material. The last just two paragraphs. Kimchana tesham abhedatmako anubhavo va drishyate pratyuta nemur nirikshana vitrupta drusho mudakaihi kamam bhava svrijinair nirayeshu nasyat ityadav abhedasya tat pratiyogi namaskarat upalakshita vedatmaka bhakti sukhameva drishyate. Moreover, we observe that their experience was not one of the absolute non-distinction. It is not that they experienced the bliss from Kaivalya Mukti or Brahmananda. Tesham abhaidatmako anubhavo va drishyate. Rather, when the Kumaras prayed in their prayers, what they said? Nemur nirikshya na vitrupta dusho mudakai. We are unsatiated by having your darshan. And the Nemuhu, they offered obeisances to the Supreme Lord. And then they said that we will gladly accept birth in any hell because of our sins. These statements cannot be made if the Kumaras experience only the abheda in seeing the Lord's form. So they experience the bliss of devotion, which is rooted in the awareness of distinction, as indicated by acts such as paying obeisances. Because when you are offering obeisances, there is definitely distinction. The person who is offering obeisances and the person to whom he is offering obeisances. So which stand in contrast to the principle of abheda or absolute non-distinction. So tasman mayukopadi nirhinatvad deyamshataya pratibhatatvacha na tajatiyam sukam api anya jatiyam kartum shaknoti iti santyeva anyata anupapatti siddhayaha swarupa shaktereva vilasaha. So therefore, it is impossible to claim that this happiness, which if based on the experience of upadhis, is of another kind. It's impossible to claim that this happiness is of another kind. Since the upadhis produced by Maya are base by nature. And because of the apparent existence of the elements in that happiness, that is in the upadhis themselves, that must be rejected. Therefore, by the process of elimination, it must be acknowledged that these features, that the Lord's forms, are manifestations of Swarupa Shakti. Swarupa Shakti Reva Vilasaha. So you can read the remaining translation and then we'll end. So similarly, from this, somebody can read.
Similarly, by the specific words Akshara Jusham Api, although situated in the bliss of the imperishable used here, it is shown that the Lord's specific qualities, namely the aroma from his lotus feet were able to surpass the bliss of imperishable Brahman. Otherwise, if in if in both instances, both in the experience of imperishable and that of a Bhagwan, they had experienced only the bliss of Brahman without attributes, then both experience would have been identical and it would be impossible for one to surpass the other. In that case, instead of Akshara Jushamapi, it would have been necessary to say, although situated in knowledge, Vidya Jushamapi, so that Upadhis would then become the focus of the next page. Comparison. In that case, instead of comparing 2 degrees of completion of the absolute, that is Brahman and Bhagavan, the comparison would be reduced to no more than the mutual contention between Upadhi of knowledge and Upadhi of form. By stating that the bliss of beholding the Lord's form defeats that of Brahman's realization, it is precluded that the Kumara's absorption in the Lord's form was mere semblance, like the great sage Vasishtha behavior of mourning for his sons. And so the Sridhara Swami commented, this verse demonstrates that the bliss of unalloyed service and relation in devotional love, Bhajanananda, is superior to the bliss of abundance in one's original state of unqualified being, Swarupananda. Therefore, variegatedness also exists in the Lord. For this reason, the Kumaras took account of the variety in their prayers when they said, only if our minds can take pleasure, like bees in your lotus feet, Bhagavatam 3:15-49, if the bliss of Brahman experienced by the Kumaras were topmost, to search for any special bliss in the mere Upadhis would have been pointless. After all, if honey is available in the kitchen corner, why hunt for it in the mountain? Nor did they have any interest in seeking out anything material. Moreover, we observe that their experience was not one of the absolute non-distinction. Rather, we see that in the statements like the Kumaras, their eyes unsated, bowed their heads to the Lord, 3:15-42, and will gladly accept birth in any hell because of our sins, 3:15-49. They experience the bliss of devotion, which is rooted in the awareness of distinction, as indicated by the act, such as paying obeisances, which stand in contrast to the principle of abheda or absolute non-distinction. It is therefore impossible to claim that this happiness, if based on the experience of upadhis, is of another kind, namely transcendental bliss, since the upadhis produced by Maya are based by nature, and because of the apparent existence of elements in that happiness, that is, in the upadhis themselves. That must be rejected. Thus, by the process of elimination, it must be acknowledged that these features, that is, the Lord's forms, are manifestations of Swarupa Shakti.
So, we will go through the commentary next week. And then next week we'll complete this anuccheda. There's the last section is also there. That will complete next week. It's little difficult to understand, but when you go through again second time, third time, we can see the finer points. What are the, we can see that Jiva Goswami is taking all possible Purva Paksha given by the Advaitavadis. Advaitavadis, they don't want to accept that the Kumaras experienced a higher bliss than Brahmananda. They want to say they experience the same bliss as the Brahmananda. Because Bhagavan is nothing but the Brahman covered by certain upadhis, superimposed by certain upadhis. And what are the faults in this argument? Or they say that Kumara's experience of the Bhagavan is not a real experience. Just like a Vasishta, when he lamented, Vasishta, who is a Brahmagyani, who lamented on the death of his sons, was not a real lamentation. Similarly, Kumaras also did not experience a real bliss. It was just more like a show or a drama. Like that, such kind of arguments are posed, and Jiva Goswami is addressing each and every argument. So, those are the points. When you go through the commentary next week, it will become once more will clear. And then the last section of the Anuccheda will complete next week. Anybody has any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Ah.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu. Prabhuji, one can see the form of the Lord by Lord's mercy only, right? Because when the Lord showed the form to Narad Muni, so the Narad Muni also experienced bliss. So is it that bliss also one experiences by the Lord's mercy? Because the Daksha Prajapati also saw the Lord's form. But there I don't think he experienced such a bliss. Because the Dhruva Maharaj seeing the form, he prayed that previously my senses were sleeping and now all my senses have awakened. So there also he experienced bliss. So the Kumaras experiencing bliss is also out of the Lord's mercy. Right? Can it be said like that?
Yeah. It's by the Lord's mercy, definitely. They experience the bliss through Lord's mercy. Brahmaji, another pure devotee, desired that the Kumaras experience the Supreme Lord's power. Therefore, the Lord's mercy followed after Brahmaji's mercy. Daksha
Yeah.
Prajapati also got darshan of the Lord, but his experience of spiritual bliss was not very deep because he still prayed for, what he prayed is that, please give me capacity to procreate living entities. Although it was a service as a Prajapati, but he was not, he desired, he had unlimited desire for sense gratification. So therefore he prayed for that. Kardama Muni had some desire, not lot of desire, some desire. And he asked the Supreme Lord, and he became purified of those desires. Daksha Prajapati, because of the residual offense he committed to Lord Shiva, so therefore Daksha Prajapati, he did not become completely purified even after getting darshan of the Supreme Lord. And also he prayed for, unlike Dhruva Maharaj, he prayed for unlimited capacity to procreate children.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, this commentary would be like a summary of what the 79 Anucheda total summary would be in that commentary, or the commentary for
this commentary is whatever we discussed today.
that.
This part of summary.
Yeah, okay. This will be summarized. Okay.
Okay, so we'll stop here. Next week we'll continue. It's a long Anucheda. We have been going through since few months in several classes. Next week this Anucheda will get over. Then we'll go to the court. Correct. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki